Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Discovery Pod with Eve. I am Eve Richards. We have a wonderful episode today. We've got a very special guest with us. He's an amazing storyteller. You could watch us and you can hear us on our YouTube Discovery Pod page, along with downloading the episodes on Google, Amazon, or wherever podcast is available. My co-host today is Tony Blas. Tony, welcome. Tony is an incredible marketer. He's also an actor. He was actually, fun fact, he actually developed the first karaoke machine in the U.S. Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Well, part of the problem was when it first came over, this was about 40 years ago, they didn't have the words on the screen, so you had to have a little booklet, and the songs were sort of old songs, and I didn't really know them, so I had to find something modern, and so we started doing pop song instrumentals.
Interesting.
And then it all led into what it became. At first, we didn't think it would work in the United States.
Wow, incredible.
But boy, it did eventually.
So I have a question for you. We sort of talked about this several times, about the pandemic. And what are some of the lessons learned? I think not just for actors, but also for folks in the business industry as well.
Well, I think that people are feeling a lot more freedom. They can work from home some of the time.
Nice.
And I think they're also really questioning what's valuable to them and what their passions are. So I see a lot more people doing things that maybe don't all line up perfectly on a CV. Everything's related. Everything feeds from one into the thing into the other. So, I think our guest today is a great example.
Oh, my goodness. I cannot wait. So I know you're going to be introducing our very special guest today. He's an incredible storyteller. So please go ahead and do the intro.
Well, I am very excited to meet and to talk to someone who's had one of the greatest runs in television, 4 decades on Days of Our Lives. Thaao Penghlis has kept the plots twisting and the passions burning by playing not one but 2 villains, Count Tony DiMera and his impersonator, Andre DiMera. But this Australian-born star is much more than a guy who knows how to deliver a nasty line or take a woman's slap. Thank you for that. Thaao is a world traveler and celebrated host of Hollywood dinner parties. His cookbook, Seducing Celebrities One Meal at a Time, has just been reissued by Brook Tower Publishing. And while the recipes imagine the perfect dinners with the likes of Elizabeth Taylor and George Clooney, Thao's real-life dinner parties in his Hollywood Hills home are legendary. After one evening, actress Doris Roberts sent him a gushing note saying that the table was so beautiful, I didn't want to sit down and mess it up. So I can imagine that was quite a spread. And this child of Greek immigrants is now pouring his passions for all things Greece into a new podcast, Thaao Penghlis' Lost Treasures, a thrilling detective-style exploration of Greece's greatest contribution to world literature, the poet Homer. His investigations have taken him to magnificent sites in Athens, Mycenae, and Troy, where Schliemann's extraordinary finds have smashed myths of ancient Greek heroes. At least that's what, according to our amazing guest today, a man, I must say, who has the most extraordinary hyphenates in Hollywood history, actor, writer, chef, and now archaeologist, Thaao Penghlis.
Incredible.
Well, that was a nice introduction. There's some words in there that are quite hard to describe because they're mouthfuls. But yes, who'd think that this immigrant that came to New York at the age of 21 would end up having a variety of different lives. And part of it, I think, was nothing was planned. So things came out of my imagination, and I think taking so many journeys in my life, I think that's the reason why my imagination was able to soar in telling stories or writing about them, exploring them, understanding other cultures, and also how to seduce people when it came with food. Because to me, if you know food and you do it well, people love to sit around a table and just talk. And that's what my life's been about. That's how I socialize. I would invite people around this watering hole. And in that watering hole was discussed many, many stories about Hollywood and everybody else's experiences. So
wow,
life continues.
Incredible. Thaao, doing the research, I actually feel like I already know you. I was intrigued by your life story and how you came to New York. You talked about I think when you moved to New York, you had an incredible friendship with actor Omar Sharif. You got to have Greek shortbread with Jackie Kennedy. You had a very close friendship with actress Doris Roberts. And with actor Omar Sharif, you used to make moussaka for him. So looking back at the time that you spent with all of these wonderful people, from the first time you actually got to meet the late Jackie Kennedy at the Art Gallery where you worked. That was such an incredible story when you talked about your previous boss who had gone to lunch and was so surprised when you came back and Jacqueline Kennedy called and that she wanted to purchase an art from you. That was incredible. Tell us about those days.
Well, when you're 21 and you're sitting there alone in a gallery where it's only by appointment only, museum quality, 18th century English furniture, Southeast Asian sculpture, and I knew my history because of schooling in Australia. And also I was a diplomat in my youth. And so I had a kind of way of socializing, even though in many ways I was pretending because I was unsure of myself at that stage of my life. So when she came in and didn't have an appointment, I was so shocked because my boss was not a particularly nice man. And he told me when he that I was to take care of the store, as he called it, and he would be back in an hour. Well, within that hour, when she knocked on the door with 2 bodyguards, and I opened that door, and there was Jacqueline Kennedy, I just said to her, well, would you like some tea? And so she came in and she loved some tea, and I had the houseman upstairs make the tea, even though he scoffed at me because I was an apprentice making $75 a week.
Wow.
And so he kind of looked upon me as like, excuse me, you want me to make tea for you? So when he came down the elevator in his shorts and Jacqueline Kennedy walked by, he got so shocked that he ran upstairs, changed into his uniform, brought down the silver trays. I spent the next 45 minutes describing every piece of sculpture that came from the 4th century China or Cambodia. And I knew the dates, I knew the stories behind the pieces, and it kind of seduced her in a way.
Wow.
And we brought the tea in with the kourambiedis, the Greek shortbread that I had made, and we sat there for an hour. Little did I know, because she asked me a lot about Greece, and we talked about Greece, and 3 months later she married Onassis. So when my boss came back, and of course, he says, anybody important come in? I said, yes, Jacqueline Kennedy. And he said, oh, sure. And he just went upstairs. And I was joking.
Oh, my God.
Until she called me 3 weeks later and bought a head sculpture from Cambodia. And he screamed at me for not really convincing them that she was there. So, there was some people you meet and you're going, oh, okay, but she came in with such grace. I can see why she was the first lady.
Yeah.
And she loved history. She loved art. And so those people in those days took time to learn where something came from, who made it, what is the history behind it, what's the voice. And so, I had some great teachers in those days. And, they were deep.
Yeah.
And so there's a big difference between today, where everything is kind of, TikTok, where everything's on the surface. It's very quick and that's it. And I remember a friend of mine at the TV the other day and saying, God, your TV works so slowly. I said, well, what are you such in a hurry for? He said, well, I'm used to it going so fast. And I said, isn't that interesting? How people don't have the patience that we had to learn, persevere in those days, to take that knowledge in. And let's face it, what I did in my 20s is what I'm still using today. So I always say to people, make sure that the young people, what seeds you plant, make sure that you plant them well, water them well, because they're going to be your assets later on in life.
Incredible.
So I just love the title of this book, Seducing Celebrities One Meal at a Time. Tell me how you came up with that title, and what does it mean?
Well, my manager had called me up and said, why don't you do a cookbook? You like to cook so much. I said, I don't know if I can remember all the recipes, because I'm the kind of person who opens the refrigerator and looks in there and I think, okay, what am I going to cook? I don't have a plan. So as my sister-in-law said, she goes by cookbooks and I go by my imagination, understanding what things taste together well and how you present them. And he said to me, the manager, so what shall we call this? So he went through a series of names, and I said, well, food to me is about seducing. It's seducing your guests. It's seducing that they stay longer, that they enjoy their evening. So, and let's face it, it's a reward for what we did that day. So I think, food should be an acknowledgement, a gift that we should take seriously and understand what we're putting in our bodies and what it does for us. And so nobody ever left my place or called me the next day and said, I'm not feeling well today. So to me, when I said, well, how about seducing celebrities? Because that's what I do in my house, being in this industry. And then he said, one meal at a time. And that's how it happened.
Wow. What a great story. I'm going to go back to the first question about Jacqueline Kennedy, just because in doing the research, I felt very emotional and I felt extremely connected to your story, because you talked about what it meant for you after selling that painting and calling your parents in Australia, who were Greek immigrants, and letting them know that you were going to be okay. How did it feel just calling your parents and letting them know that you had sold this painting?
I realize, Eve, that through life, things that cross your path, if you're aware, there are signposts. And I didn't know it in that time because I was too young to understand or comprehend that idea, that when she crossed my path, that was the first bit of fame that this immigrant, this young man who didn't really know that much, experienced. And I thought, that's because I look back at it, and not only that, the John Gielguds that I met in my life, that the Harold Prince, so many important people who made a difference in their careers and to their audience, and the way they educated us and shared the beauty of what they created. I saw it as a signpost. I realized that, because that's why I called my parents. I thought, well, if this is what's going to be knocking on my door, then maybe that's a sign that I'm going to have some success. I didn't know that it would take 8 years after that to get my first gig, but perseverance. Biggest lesson I ever had, and a collector of stories, because to me, there's nothing worse than being silent when somebody talks to you. There's nothing worse about someone talking to you and not being able to answer them or give your own opinion. And so with Jacqueline Kennedy, I think the diplomacy I had that I learned in Australia and the upbringing I had, I think it allowed her to share an experience with me as young as I was and feel that she was in a safe place. And so, those are the times when you pay attention. You're too young sometimes to know it, but if I can say to a young person, watch who crosses your path and watch how you stop at that particular time, because you know there's something meant for you to pay attention to, and that which stops along your path, but you continue on because it is either a threat or it's not worth your time. Yeah. I think, life is short. As we get older, we realize we have less time, and so I like to fill my time. I don't like wasting time. So to me, every day is a day of new knowledge.
So how did you become involved in exploring the Iliad and the Odyssey? And also to that point, what makes you believe that these myths really happened?
Well, that's a good question. It was when I was doing Mission Impossible in 1990. And I was in Athens, and I went to the museum, the archaeological museum. I had not been there. And I remember a man behind the counter saw me and came behind the counter and just screamed and came and hugged me. He said, "We are so proud that you are Greek and you're doing Mission Impossible. We love you here." And I'm going, oh my God, I was here a couple of years ago. I didn't get any attention. So it was kind of interesting what show business can do for you. Yeah. And he said, "What can I do to show you our pride of you being Greek?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to meet the Minister of Culture. I want to see the archaeological discoveries of Schliemann in Mycenae. The archaeological discoveries in Troy had been stolen or lost in the Second World War and ended up in the Pushkin Museum in Russia. And so when I explored these treasures, and then I read a book that talked about the great love, the Greek treasure it was called, and a story really about him and his discoveries, and also that he wanted a Helen of Troy basically by his side when he discovered all these treasures that he believed existed, because when he was 8 years of age, his father gave him a book, and he said, "Father, look at these walls of Troy in this book. It must still be there in the ruins." And he said, no, son, these are all myths. And he says, "But look, there's walls. There must be some treasure there." And the father laughed at him. Wow. So it wasn't until 1867 that this young boy's dream of where he predicted he would find the treasure of Troy took place. Wow. So that, for me, was when you have a dream as a young person, how do you fulfill it? Yeah. And so I went to the Gennadius Library. I went through 60,000 documents of Schliemann. I sat in the archaeological room of the library, and I went through press releases from him, his 26 diaries that were there, the love letters to his wife, the letters to other archaeologists. So I took notes, and I thought, I don't know what this is going to come, but this is something for me that I've taken time to explore. And then I was allowed to go into his house, which was closed at the time. It's a big mansion, and I sat at his desk. And then I went to Troy, and then I sat above 9 cities that they didn't know in the 1860s. Where is Troy in those 9 cities? And they found the burnt city of Troy. And then I went to the cemetery of First Kolonos in Athens, and I saw his mausoleum. Wow. And I went up there, and I thought to myself, there he was, his bust overlooking the Aegean, and there's all around it is all these expressions of how he had discovered Troy with his wife. And then there was this bronze door, and I thought, I wonder how he's buried in there. Is he buried like normal people in mausoleums, or is there something different? So in my exploration, I found out what happened in there, and that became a story in itself. Mm-hmm. And so when I came back and I had all this knowledge, I thought, what do you do with knowledge? It's like, you open your fridge and you have all these ingredients. What do you cook from it? So I took a story from it. And sorry to be long-winded about this, but that's how the story was seeded. by having and gone through it. And then it just kind of took over. And then I read 9 books on him.
Wow.
And then one day I said, I'm going to sit down and write a story on him.
Wow.
And that's how my Lost Treasures began.
Incredible.
Absolutely.
As a sequel to that question, your delivery of the Lost Treasure is eloquent. I literally did not know much about archaeology, and I spent so much time reading about it and just listening to you. It was intriguing. You know, you're such an incredible storyteller. You've talked a little bit about next season of the Lost Treasures. Are you willing to share? I know you've talked about a few ideas. You talked about the golden age. So are you willing to tell us what the next season of the Lost Treasures will focus on?
I'm just about finishing a biblical story.
Wow.
I have seen lots of postcards, as we all have, over Christmas time, and I always thought, well, what's a postcard? It's a photograph in time, but very specifically. But it stands still. It doesn't go anywhere. I took 2 weeks off and went up and down the Nile, exploring where the Holy Family escaped and hid from Herod. I wanted to know certain things which I won't give away, but I started to explore, and suddenly I found myself thinking, oh my God, there's another story here. And so how do you tell a story that's been told so often, where carols have been sung about it, where we take it for granted, just like Thanksgiving, we automatically think it's about a turkey and family getting together and sitting around a table and embracing everybody with a certain love. To me, it had gravitas, and I thought, well, how do you explore this? So, because I investigated the Schliemann story, and I thought, well, how do I investigate the next one? So, when I went to Egypt, which I've been 14 times now, I wrote In Search of a Goddess, and there's all these stories available, but it's in the way you tell them.
Got it.
It's the way you see them through your experience, through your eyes. Because when you go into another culture, for me, it's not about, oh, this was lovely, let's go and have dinner, or let's go and have lunch, or I never did that. I took subject and I really went for it. And so, and that's how I infiltrated certain secret societies in Egypt and other countries, where I met people that crossed my path. I asked questions, and because of my interest and because I was curious and because maybe I knew more than they did, because I like to do the research before I go into another culture, because I don't want to be ignorant. And that's what happens. People appreciate that you know something about their culture. You know about us. You took time to know about us. And also because every different country, you have a different sense of behavior.
Yes.
And you don't, break the rules. I mean, look what happens in Russia now. I mean, you have to really be aware. You just can't be ignorant because of people's political beliefs or the way they like to trick you, and because they're going to make money from you, because as a tourist, just like a guy tried to trick me into and trap me in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. And that was really upsetting, because I thought to myself, he's got a job because people like me come and visit, and yet what he was trying to do was trying to entrap me.
Wow.
Like one even broke a piece of a boat, of an ancient boat, behind a curtain, came and wanted money and give it to me. And I said, how do you do that? How do you just break that piece? And then it dawned on me, he probably does this all the time. It's probably the same piece. And what they do is they trick you. Some people, tourists, going, because I know some people took golden coins from somebody in there and tried to leave with them. And then he would go around and then tell the secret police there, and they would take you and make $15,000 by throwing you into prison, or you pay a certain fine. And then they do the same thing, routine, over and over again. And so you have to be careful of trickery and how other people try to entice you into getting you into trouble and losing monies.
Yeah.
So, this is not an easy world to travel in.
Yes.
You've got to be smart.
Oh, yes.
You've got to know who's your opponent. And that comes out of understanding early on in your life who's in front of you.
Yeah. That's so true. I love traveling as well. One of the things that just still with this Egypt story that you had talked about was you almost got kidnapped in Egypt.
Yeah.
Can you share any experiences from that?
I had, the fourth podcast is about those experiences that I had and why I wrote the podcast. I was a big enthusiast. I had two plans in my life, and that was to see the Acropolis in the Parthenon at the Acropolis in Athens and to see the pyramids at Giza. So I was 26 years of age. I was at the casino. I'd won some money, and then I got into a cab, and he says, "Where would you like to go?" And I said, "The pyramids," because it was a full moon. And he said to me, "Well, you want to go to the pyramids now?" I said, "Yes, there's a full moon out there. I want to see the pyramids at night. I've never seen them." And I was supposed to see them tomorrow with a group. And so what I did was he took me there, which was half an hour outside of Cairo, and I ran all the way to Cheops's pyramid, the large pyramid, and then looked up at, and for the first time saw them at my feet like I wanted. And there was the full moon on top of Cheops. We're talking about 2600 BC, the pyramid. And it was such an incredible, it was like a halo on top of the pyramid and the other two pyramids in shadow. And all I knew was I was standing there crying because I was so moved by this amazing thing that I had been shown when I was in school of just a photograph. Mm. And the next thing I know is 5 men out of nowhere, black faces with rifles and black calabas on, just grab me and start pulling me into the desert. And I said to them, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? And they said, "Oh, we'll show you what it's like in the pyramids." And I said, no, I'm fine. He said, no, we'll show you. And then I thought, how do you kill an idea that they had with another idea? And so what I said to them was, do you know, I found out that the Greeks, my heritage, built these.
Wow.
Well, the one who understood English got really upset and said to the others, he's saying that the Greeks built our pyramids. And they start screaming at me and shouting. So they lost their intention. Mm-hmm. And I saw a little bit of an opening, and I dashed through because I was a big athlete when I was a kid in Australia. And I ran, and then I heard the police sirens coming.
Wow.
And then the police came. They escaped. They disappeared. And then the police threatened me at that time and said, "Don't you ever do this again, because people disappear in that desert." Because, behind the pyramids, it's all desert.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It was a scary moment. And thank God for the cab driver who called the police and saw what was going on. I mean, I'm talking about he could see it from over 100 yards away. Wow. So I had to really dash while they chased me. And then when they heard the sirens, they raced off. And so that was one of the most dangerous times I had. And so, of course, I don't go there at night. Yeah. And also, I don't go anywhere in Egypt without a guide.
Yeah.
Wow, it sounds like Indiana Jones or some kind of adventure. Are you ever concerned that maybe it's too dangerous to keep going?
I suppose I always felt protected. One of the things I did as a young man, because I was very confused, I left because I didn't have mentoring in Australia in my youth. My father didn't really teach me much except what not to do. My uncles were so busy just earning a living, there was nobody around to ask questions. And so when I did arrive in America, and I met some extraordinary people, and also I found my mentor in life, and that was Milton Cancella's great acting and directing coach. And I told him one time I was going to take a journey. I was exploring Alexander the Great, and because he had died in Egypt, I thought, wouldn't it be nice? He was buried in Egypt. I'd like to go to Egypt. And so I also went to Lebanon. And in Lebanon, there's a place called Sur, which is south of Lebanon, south of Beirut. And I was there with a friend who was Lebanese from Australia. And so he called me up when I was in Egypt and said, why don't you come and come to Lebanon? I'll show you Lebanon. So I flew and I went, and we were driving south. And the next thing I know is I said, where are we? He says, this is where all the war's been taking place. I said, look at all those bullet holes in those walls. It's just, oh my God, that's the Israelis. And then they had said to us previously, where I wanted to go, the last big king there at the time was Montserrat, and all that was, they had buried bombs all around that area. And so when we came and I stopped to look at the bullet holes, the next thing I knew is that my car door opens, a Hezbollah man that had a face like a bull pulls me out of the car, throws me against the wall, and accuses me of being an Israeli spy.
Wow.
And I thought, I look like an Israeli spy? I mean, I thought to myself, this is the lack of knowledge, of the ignorance of these people. And if it wasn't for the United Nations man who was watching, who was from New Zealand, and recognized me, and it came up, he says, do you know who this man is? This is Israeli spy. In my face he was. And he goes, no, calm down. No, he's an actor. Well, I find out 2 days later they hung two men in the street because they were spies. Wow. So would I do it? Yes. That's why I always think there's an angel somewhere coming to my rescue.
Definitely.
For all my... Listen, if you're going to... Nothing comes easily in life, I don't believe. If it does, you lose it as quickly. Yeah. I think you have to invest in things and have the perseverance to see how things evolve, so that when you go into the new culture and you come across people like that, I always have had someone come somehow save me. Yeah. And also, diplomacy helps.
Yes, of course. Incredible.
How do you speak back? And also you don't show fear, and you don't try to pay them off.
Yeah.
Because that can get you into a lot of trouble, because you don't know who you're dealing with. Just like the guy in the museum in Cairo who tried to entrap me and kept saying to me, I'd like to go out with you. My answer was, why? He said, because you look like you're a nice man. And I said, but why? He said, well, you can take me up to your room. We can have a good discussion. We can have a lunch. I said, but why? I kept asking why. And it baffled him. He got so upset because I threw him off track that he threw open his lapel and showed me he was secret police. So he was trying to get money.
Wow.
So those things.
Yeah. So, when I read about your life and all that you've achieved, looking back at the young immigration officer in Australia, and you had a one-way ticket to New York. I think it was a Miss Hernandez who helped get you a one-way ticket. And looking at where you are today, you've achieved so much. Has the journey been what you thought it would be? It's a two-part question. Has it been worth it? And is this what you expected?
No, to all questions. Nothing that has happened to me in my life. Nothing that I planned. Really, I had no plan. All I did was staying in the present, educating myself, because I thought when the time comes and life shows me what I'm meant to do, I'm going to be prepared. So I built knowledge in all parts of my life. I mean, my teacher Milton said something interesting. He says, we in life are interpreters, but what we do is, it's like a necklace, and every time you achieve something, another bead goes on until the necklace is complete. So I'm at that point in my life, because life is about becoming, and then you become. And when you realize that, it's when you're able to look at other people and try to help them, because you have a good understanding of what you're standing on, what you know, what you've experienced. And none of what's happened came to me without hard work. I never got anything easily, you know. I was the kind of guy you walk in and they say, I don't understand. You look one way and you sound another. So that was confusing to people.
Yeah.
But I realized someday someone will come along and say, well, that's an interesting combination. Let me take that accent and that look and make it something. So, of course, villains. And then you can play with that.
Love it.
So I have all those ingredients I've collected along the way where I would start to intimidate certain actors who were playing the heroes.
Whoa.
So, you know, you learn the tricks of the trade. You don't show them everything all at once. And then when the time is ready, that's when you do it. And then it throws them in many ways.
Wow.
But, you know, I think when I met Omar Sharif and he came in, he wasn't totally impressed with me. He just said, oh, hello, and ignored me. And then it wasn't until we had to do a big scene where he came and he was going to punch me, and I was supposed to fly over a desk. And he was on the arrogant side, I have to say. And he said to me, and we were in Zagreb, in the Yugoslavia at the time, and he said to me, listen, this is all he said to me, listen, when I punch you and you go flying over this desk, please don't break it in the way you fall, because this is an 18th century table. I said, oh, Omar, I'm not going anywhere. He goes, what? I said, I'm not going anywhere. If you punch me now and I go down, you and I have nowhere to go for the next 4 hours in this story. So I said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to adjust my tie when you hit me. So he suddenly went, I love you. And from that moment, we had caviar and champagne.
Oh, that's funny.
In 6 weeks. So
wow. Oh,
he was great.
That's funny. So you've worked with some of the greatest, including Omar Sharif and obviously the late Elizabeth Taylor on General Hospital. You know, what are your experiences of working with these great actors?
Well, you know, to me, it's you don't know enough. When you meet people who have had that kind of success, and you can't just say, well, you know, I wonder what their formula is. There's no formula. I think everybody has a different kind of persona, and you're responsible for that persona, not anybody else's, and you work it. It's like, how do you go to a gym and you work out your body and make it and bring it to its physical form and make it look attractive? So you learn to use all different parts, your mind, your spirit, your physicality. All those things are part of the package that you as a person need to develop as you go through life. So when I see actors like that who have arrived, they were my teachers to me because they knew more. They had more success. And she was, I could tell by the way she would throw a joke out, you know. She knew how to laugh at herself. When she couldn't remember a line or she flubbed it or she didn't think it was a very good delivery, she would make a joke of it. She didn't take it seriously, you know. What she did know is, how did she make an entrance?
Wow.
How do you make an entrance? So that's why I say, put that whole package together.
Yes.
And one day you'll know when you go through a door, someone's going to say, who's that?
Wow.
So that's, to me, that's what an entrance is. It's about shining the light that only comes together when you have taken the time to understand what you brought into this life and how you developed it.
Wow. What great advice.
Absolutely. Have you ever seen Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra?
Yes.
I have just seen that recently, and of course there's a lot of mythology around the making of it, part of which she was the first actor to be paid $1 million for a film role. And apparently it was because she was uncomfortable in thinking that she could, pull off an epic like that.
Wow.
And I was just wondering if you ever got a chance to talk to her about that, and specifically maybe how it related to the Egyptian worship Alexander as a god, basically.
Well, in those days, Cleopatra was not a success, and Fox had to sell certain parts of its property in Century City. That's why you have all those apartments now. They used to be Fox. So you don't talk to people about failures.
Wow.
And when I had the time to speak to her, and I was on one knee talking to her while she was sitting in a chair, I cannot remember what she said or what I said to her. I was so taken by the fact that I was kneeling at Elizabeth Taylor's, presence.
Wow.
So I can't tell you, I cannot remember, except how beautiful, how gracious, those eyes, I remember. But I can't remember, so I can't tell you anything about Cleopatra. I never liked the movie. I thought it was too long. I thought it was disjointed. I loved Burton. I thought they had a great cast. I thought Rex Harrison as Julius Caesar was wonderful. But as a whole, there are sequences that are wonderful in it, but I think it's kind of disjointed. That's why it was a failure, I think. It wasn't received well, and also because it was so expensive.
Wow.
Because she had time off, she had her dramas, I suppose, in those days.
Amazing. So you're such a busy man. You have The Lost Treasure. You've got your book, Seducing. What can you tell us about your role on Days of Our Lives?
It's about longevity, isn't it?
It is.
To be part of a story for 41 years now.
Incredible.
And still have something to offer.
Yeah.
Depending on the writer, I suppose. But when actors, during our breaks, would go and play football or do tennis or do whatever they would do for their time off, build a shed, whatever. I took journeys to lands that a lot of people didn't go to. And when I came back, I was full and fresh. And so I never got bored with because that's what can happen in serials.
Yeah.
Is that, how do you keep feeding the same character and keeping him fresh? And for me, it was about going outside of myself and then coming back, because, the old saying, when you leave the front door of your house, when you come back, something about you would have changed. And so I think that's what happened with me. I created a change, a shift.
Incredible.
And so that's what, to me, life is. You want to have a shift, change.
Wonderful.
You're the master of your ship.
Yeah.
So I would say,
Thaao, thank you so much for sharing so much insight. A lot of people are going to learn from your journey to find their identity. We've enjoyed talking to someone who leads intentionally. It causes us to look at yourself more deeply.
Absolutely. All the amazing, beautiful women you've met throughout history.
Incredible.
Wow. And apparently seducing them through food.
Incredible. I know, ladies and gentlemen, Thao's book is available on Amazon.com. You could follow him on Twitter.com, Thaao Penghlis. He's also on Instagram and on Facebook. Thank you so much.
And
it's been
Spotify
incredible.
for the Lost Treasures. And Amazon is also the Lost Treasures. So,
awesome. Thank you.
They're good stories.
Thank you. It's been amazing.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share them with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been incredible to speak with a legend. What did you learn from this?
What I learned is that you need to do whatever your passion, you need to follow your passion. And he's certainly done that. Wherever it took him,
yes,
he went fearlessly.
Incredible. I'm amazed and intrigued, and I have so much that I could apply to my life as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching us today. Please download this episode on Spotify, Amazon, Google, or you could watch us on the Discovery Pod YouTube page. Again, thank you so much for watching us. Remember to follow Thaao and check out the Lost Treasures. Thanks again, and see you soon.